So welcome to today's office hours. I'm Ashley Green, and today we will be looking at billing with the workbench. And we will also have time at the end for questions. And as always, we will be recording this presentation, and the video will be posted to the user support hub later on. But before we start, we do have a couple of announcements to share. So applications for the National Alliance for Hispanic Health Gentos research grants are due Monday, October 28th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern. So you may learn more about and submit your application at the link on the screen, or you may use and scan the QR code that we have available for you. So areas of special interest for the grant include Hispanic women's health and health concerns of rural Hispanic communities. And successful applicants will receive up to $10,000 to support their research project and to be part of the Foundation's Healthy Americas Research Consortium Todos Gentos. And the other announcement we have for you all is the Aim Ahead Research Fellowship Program will engage a group of early career researchers to actively participate in biomedical research that involves the use of AI ML. And the fellowship program provides funding to support and additional resources for the researchers who will utilize Aim Ahead and to gain access to the training, the data, and the infrastructure needed to rapidly develop research skills required in the use of AI ML field. So you may learn more about this by using the QR code that we have on the screen, or we also have the link here on the screen as well. So our presenter today is Brandy Mapes. Brandy Mapes is an assistant director at the Vanderbilt Institute for Clinical and Translational Research, specializing in strategic planning and implementation of national research programs, including the past work on the eMERGE Network and NCAT's Clinical and Translational Science Awards program. So her current portfolio includes the Elvis Research Program's Data and Research Center, where she has led efforts to develop and implement researcher education, training, and outreach programs, as well as methods for participant surveys and accompanying research support materials development. So in addition to all of us, she does also support Vanderbilt's local biorepository program known as BioView. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Brandy.
Thank you, Ashley. Hi, everyone. It's really nice to be here today. As Ashley mentioned, I work really closely with our researcher support team. And one thing they had brought up was that we're starting to see some questions around billing, paying for research. So this is a topic that I enjoy covering, as strange as that sounds. So we thought we'd talk about it today. Let me go ahead and get my slides set up. Let's see. All right. And if I think you all can see them. So we'll go ahead and get started. So for today, we're going to cover a few different elements of paying for your research. We're going to start off by talking about how you can go about understanding exactly what it is you're paying for. We're going to talk about getting started with your research by taking advantage of the All of Us Compute credits that are available upon registration. We're going to talk about how to get a billing account set up with Google Cloud. We're also going to talk about, once you have that billing account set up, how to go about linking it back to your Researcher Workbench account. And then we're going to just go over some tips and recommendations around making sure that you're getting the most out of Google Cloud billing and Researcher Workbench features to help you monitor your cost and introduce some savings where you can. So the big thing to think about in terms of payment and what you're being charged for is understanding where the payment is originating from. So as a program, All of Us does not charge any cost for data access, so researchers can register for their account and get into the Workbench free of charge. Costs come in terms of actual compute spend. So the Researcher Workbench is an online platform. It's hosted in Google Cloud. Whenever you're doing things like extracting data or analyzing data, you're introducing spend that's tied to Google Cloud infrastructure. So Google Cloud Engine, Google BigQuery, for example. And that's the actual cost you're paying for. It's whenever you set up your workspace and you go about analyzing your actual data. So that compute can be broken down into a few different components. So that includes data. So as I mentioned, it's stored in BigQuery. Each time you start up a new project and you start extracting the data for your analysis, you're pulling that data from the BigQuery dataset into your own analysis notebook and virtual machine. There's some cost for that. One of the very best things about all of us is that our data set is so large and it's so multifaceted. But of course, because of that, it can come with some large cost if you're not careful. So things you really want to think about are data types that are especially large. So this would be genomics data, wearable data like Fitbit device, Fitbit data. That data is just, it's such granular level detail, and there's so much of it that those are things that you really want to be considerate about whenever you're building your cohort and you're selecting what to extract. The other part of what you're paying for is the actual applications and analysis. So within the Researcher Workbench, you can analyze your data using Jupyter Notebooks, SAS, RStudio. All of those applications are actually opened in a virtual machine. So each time you start your analysis, you're opening a new virtual machine, and there's costs associated with that. Some things that are really important to think about are, within a Jupyter Notebook, which I think is definitely one of the preferred methods across the researcher community, is that there are some default settings for that environment in terms of CPUs, RAM, etc. And you can customize that. And sometimes there's very good reasons to customize that in cases where your data is really large or you need to analyze something for a certain amount of time, etc. But making those customizations also impact your cost. The other part of this is storage. So each workspace, you have a couple of options to store in Google Cloud. You can store to a persistent disk. The disk is tied to each individual researcher account. You can also take advantage of your workspace storage bucket. In both cases, the files that you're storing, how large they are, and the types of data associated with them are responsible for a small amount of cost that you can incur. So you also have some opportunity to be sure that you're reviewing what you're storing on a fairly regular basis to see, is there something I don't need anymore, and I can save some of that cost. And then we talked about this, but all of these costs are tied to your individual research project in your workspace. So compute is tied to each workspace that you create, so you can actually see and monitor your work, your actual spend at the workspace or project level. So if we try to just contextualize what we talked about through some examples, here are a few examples of featured workspaces that are in the bench that you can view, and some breakdowns of data size, volume, applications, and then costs like we just talked about. So looking at that first example, we have an LDL cholesterol GWAS. It's a GWAS. Many data were involved, but I just want to highlight this is genomics data, cohort of around 40,000 participants, looking at 3.4 million variants across the cohort. The use of Jupyter Notebook, 16 CPUs, 104 gigabytes of RAM, 100 gigabyte persistent disk, resulted in $10 for running the analysis, so for their runtime. You can see a few other examples here. Another one to highlight would be at the bottom, this wearable and human phenome project. That's Fitbit data, which we mentioned was our other large data set. So also phenotypic data involved, but the big one's Fitbit. A cohort of around 214,000 participants, looking at around 50.6 billion step records for the cohort. Jupyter Notebook was used for analysis, 4 CPUs, 15 gigabytes of RAM, 120 gigabytes of disk storage needed, $35 for running that analysis. So one thing is, it sounds scary to talk about cost, but there are, for the most part, we see researchers who are able to run many projects on the initial credits we're about to talk about without running out. But there are some ways that you want to be sure that you're setting up your project and you're really thinking about efficiency that can impact your cost. So now we'll talk about those credits. So to get started, you simply need to begin your research. And whenever you register for the Workbench, all of us makes available $300 in initial compute credits that's automatically tied to your account. There's no action at this time that you need to take in order to start using those. You can also check your balance on those at any time. So you can do that by logging into the Workbench, clicking on that menu icon in the very left top hand corner, selecting the arrow by your name, and then clicking Profile. Your profile page includes a good bit of information about you, all of which you provided at registration. And in the right corner, you'll see a box that'll show you your actual credit balance and remaining amount. The next part of this is, let's say you've either exhausted, your team has exhausted their initial credits, or you know you will. You know you're going to be doing a number of projects. You know your projects are large. You want to start evaluating how to go about setting up your Google Cloud billing account. There are a couple of options to set up an account through Google. You can do what's referred to as a self-managed or self-service account. Or you can go through what Google refers to as a Google partner or third-party reseller. It's really a great idea. I always recommend that research teams consult with their own local departments, whether that's your supervisor, advisor, department administrator, grant manager, on what approach might be best for you. All institutions have different policies and procedures in place when it comes to procurement and contracting, who can sign, who can review, what you as an individual can do within your department. So it's best to take this part back to your own team to evaluate, consult with, and then make a decision. I can provide a bit of information on both of these and some tips for helping to determine which one might be best. So a third-party reseller, this would be a Google platform partner. So Google works with many different vendors that help researchers and users with account setup and account management. So for example, Carahsoft is a distributor of vendors. And we recommend that you work with Carahsoft if you are based in the US and eligible for what we refer to as NIH Strides discounts. The National Institutes of Health has a program, it's Strides. This initiative is meant to help researchers get started with, use, and pay for their research in the cloud. And within this initiative, they have a partnership with Carahsoft, who is a Google Cloud distributor, to help researchers with additional discounts for their research whenever they partner with them. So that's a really good option. In terms of the differences between these two, a third-party reseller, there's many different options. So let's say, for example, you're a research team who's based outside of the US. Carahsoft wouldn't be an option for you, but there is information on Google Cloud, their partner page, where you can explore and figure out which distributor might be best for you based off of your region and your team's needs. Some of the benefits of working with a reseller, as I mentioned, if you're NIH funded, it makes complete sense. Some other things are, if your department, if you're setting up your billing account to cover many projects, either for you or to cover the projects across a large team, or this is an account that you're going to use to manage your spend on the Researcher Workbench and other sources, that's a great approach. They're able to help apply discounts that wouldn't otherwise be available to an individual user. They're also able to help customize and set up multiple projects within an account. So when things start to get complex, or whenever you're funded by NIH, great idea to consult with a third-party seller such as Carahsoft. If you're a researcher and you're self-funded, you have one small project or maybe just a couple, that self-managed account option might be right for you. It's definitely something that can be a bit quicker in terms of contracting and review at your institution level. Let's say your team has decided that going through a distributor or partner like Carahsoft is the right approach for you. There's a few steps. The first step is contacting the vendor representative to let them know that you'd like to create an account and that you're going to be using your account for the All of Us Researcher Workbench. If you are US based and NIH funded, you can actually connect with Carahsoft directly from within the Workbench. And your workspace page, there's a section for creating a billing account and a form where you can send Caresoft an email directly. Once you reach out, whether it's Caresoft or another vendor, that vendor will then work with you and your own department points of contact and contracting to figure out whether or not your institution has a contract with Google Cloud in place already, and if not, how to go about getting one started. I think one thing to note is if your own individual department doesn't have a contract, that's not to say your institution doesn't, and sometimes that matters. And so they're able to help you sort through those things and lead you in the best place. Going through a vendor, you will provide the necessary information about your organization, your billing details, and then they will set up that account for you. They'll work with you and your team to figure out what you need, how many different funding sources you have, and they'll go about setting up your account. I've put some screenshots here. This first one to your left is an example of what I just mentioned about sending a message directly from within the Researcher Workbench about what that looks like. The one to your right is if you're interested in setting up through a third-party reseller and you don't qualify for Caresoft or you're based outside of the US, this is a screenshot from the Google site where you can actually go and search for a vendor that might be right for you. Now we'll look at the steps for other options. So let's say you've consulted with your team, a self-managed account makes sense. You can do this via Google directly online. So you will sign into what's referred to as the Google Cloud Console. Really strongly recommend creating or using a Google identity and email address that's something not your researchallofus.org address. It's best to set this up under your own institutional email, Gmail, whatever you want, as long as it's not your Researcher Workbench account. You'll create a new account, again, provide the information that you need about your organization, your billing payment. You can provide a billing payment in terms of a credit card, a debit card, etc. And then you'll read and agree to their terms of use, add your payment, verify your payment, and you're all set up. I want to stress that's the very first step. So if you don't have a billing account and you need to cover your cost in the workbench, the very first step is getting one set up, and that happens completely separate from the workbench. So that is, totally a Google Cloud thing. You'll want to work directly with your team. You'll want to go about getting your Google Cloud billing account set up. There's no dependency on the workbench to do that part. This next part is about, let's say now you have that Google Cloud billing account in place. How do I make sure my Google Cloud billing account knows that I can spend money from it through my Researcher Workbench account? And how does my Researcher Workbench account know about my billing account? There's a couple of steps that you're going to need to do. The first step is it happens directly in your Google Cloud billing console. You're going to need someone with administrator level permissions for your Google Cloud account to take this step. So if you created that account yourself, you are by default the administrator. If you've gone through your team or it's an account that's managed by your department, you very well may not be. And so it's a good idea to figure out internally who's the administrator for your account, who has the permissions required to add and remove billing users. So that person is going to log into the account. They're going to select account management from the left-hand side menu. They're going to select add principal, and they're going to add your researchallofus.org email or account, as well as Tara-billing@tara.bio as billing users for the account. I want to stress that this is probably the step that gives people the most trouble from what we've seen on our support team. What we've seen is usually either the users haven't been added at all, so this step is skipped, or the information has been added, but it hasn't been added as a billing user. It's been added as a viewer or an admin. And so if you're having issues, this is probably the first thing to troubleshoot on your own. And I would say the ones that I've helped with, 75% have been resolved through this step. One thing to note about this is just that, it happens through the Google Cloud Console. Google has the way that they handle account management and who can see what and do what is through what they refer to as these role permissions. So a billing user, that permission basically just means that this account technically is allowed to be linked to another source. It doesn't mean as a billing user that you can go in and see the actual spend, see the actual payment info. It just means that that account can use or pull from the Google Cloud account. Once this step is done, the very next thing you'll do happens in the Researcher Workbench itself. So to do this step, you're going to need to be or connect with the person who originally created the workspace. So a workspace creator is always the person who's the compute for the entire workspace is tied to. So they have the ability to actually update billing information for the workspace. For new workspaces as a billing creator, whenever you create these in the About section, that first step that you do where you complete information about your project, you'll see a selection, which is here in this right lower corner screenshot, where you can select a billing account. As long as step 1 has been done, you'll be able to select the billing account you created. You will also need to individually update billing for your existing workspaces. So it doesn't happen automatically. It happens at that workspace level. So let's say you have a workspace and you've run out of credits and it's time to update it. You'll go to that workspace, you'll click edit, and you'll add or change the billing information for it there. Some information about managing your cost. I think some of this we talked about at the very start, but I just want to reemphasize it here. But there's a couple of things or a few features in your actual Google Cloud billing account that you'll want to take advantage of and explore. So your Google Cloud billing account will allow you to monitor your spend. You can see reports. You can see spend even at the project level. So in the Researcher Workbench, a project is referred to as a workspace. Those workspaces will surface in your Google Cloud billing account as individual projects. So you'll be able to see the spend at the project level. You'll also be able to see individual components that contribute to spend at the project level. So for example, you can see, Google Cloud Engine spend, which is tied to your application running, or you'll be able to see the storage, which would be tied to your workspace bucket. There's also some really nice features that allow you to set up budgets and alerts. And you can, again, do this at the project level. One thing that I've done even for my own work, and I encourage other people to do is, let's say your project has a total budget of, $500. It's great that you can create a budget spending alert. You'll want to set an alert so that you know as soon as you get close to that. So sometimes rather than set that alert for the max of what your budget is, maybe set it for a lower threshold so that you'll be reminded as you get closer. So there's a lot of features there. And then within the Researcher Workbench itself, there's some features that our team has developed to help protect and help researchers manage and guide them through their spend. So one big thing is auto deletion feature for individual applications. So applications are configured to automatically delete after a specific amount of time, depending on the application itself. This is set by default. As a researcher, you have the option to opt out of that setting. And we recommend that you don't, unless you have a good reason to, unless you're really intentional about that. And so the auto delete feature will just make sure that if you forget to shut down your environment when you close your browser, it will automatically delete after a certain amount of time. So remember, as long as your environment's running, there is compute associated with that. So this is a great feature to take advantage of. You also just want to close your environment, close out of that as soon as you're done. The other thing is, your persistent disk management. There's a really nice feature that we have. There's a page within your profile called Cloud Environments. So if you're in the bench, you'll go back to that left-hand menu, click the arrow next to your name, and select Cloud Environment. That page will show you what's running at any given time. So if you have a virtual machine that's open, you forgot about it, you have a persistent disk that's created. This is probably the second biggest cost-related issue I think I've seen from researchers is either they don't realize that they can delete their own persistent disk, or they didn't even know that they've created one. So we really encourage researchers just routinely, maybe even before your session, is take a look at your cloud environment page, see if something is open, needs to be deleted, and that's a great opportunity to do so. Storage bucket management, I don't think we see this issue quite as much, but always a good idea to just, on a routine basis that you set, take a look at what you're storing in case there are files that you just simply don't need to be storing anymore and you can delete, and that'll save a small amount of cost. Virtual machine customization, which we talked about at the beginning. It's going to be set as a default setting for Jupyter Notebooks. You can customize that. Remember that increasing your configuration can lead to increased costs, but can also be most efficient depending on your data. So that's just something you're gonna want to try. And then being really mindful about your queries and your outputs. I think one thing that our data science team has been really helpful in reminding people about is if you're going to be running data, or you have a really large cohort or a really large amount of data, especially when it comes to genomics, it's really good to maybe try a couple of test cases with a smaller sample or a smaller region first, just to get a really good judge of what your costs are looking like, and then ramp up versus setting everything to the largest settings right off the gate. All right, I think this. So I thought I will pause my screen for a second and we will just take a look around at a few of the features we talked about. Let's see. Oh, and of course I've logged myself out. So if you give me just a second, I will log in and we will take a look. All right, let's see. So I'm going to show you the actual Researcher Workbench so you see my screen. The first thing I'll do is just show you how to get to that profile where you can look at your credit balance. So again, left-hand menu, arrow right next to my name, click Profile. And you can see here is your actual box with your credit balance listed. Now let's take a look at the cloud environments page we talked about. Again, left-hand menu, arrow next to your name, cloud environments. And I looked at this a little earlier and I already know I have something to take care of, so I will. But there you go. That's just a reason to take a look. So again, if you have any persistent disk here, they'll be listed and you'll be able to delete these. So this is a really good resource. Now let's take a look about our actual workspaces and where you can find the information we talked to for linking your accounts. So let's say I'm going to create a new account. You'll see right here is create. If I know I'm eligible for Strides like we discussed and I want to engage Carahsoft, it's this form right here, use a billing partner, this form. I will fill this information out and it will send that right over. Again, as a distributor, they will look across many different types of vendors to figure out what might be the best for your institution and your needs. I've already, just for today, added myself to one of my billing accounts so I can show you what this looks like. So once you've been added as a billing user to your Google Cloud billing account, you will come here. And the very first time you pick this dropdown, you'll only see your credits because the system is asking you, is recognizing that there's another source and asking you to verify it. So you'll just click on your own name, press continue, press allow, and your billing account will display for you. So you can actually make that update here. This is what this looks like for a new workspace. Let's say I needed to update billing on an existing workspace that I own. Just created one here so that we could take a look. So you will edit, which means you go all the way over here to the right, select this menu, select edit. And again, this information is going to show up. Because I just, in that previous step, sort of authorized my billing account, connected it to my workbench, it's automatically going to be listed in this drop down here. One other thing I was going to maybe really quickly let's see if I can do this one really quick. I didn't want to show, oh, no, I'm not going to be able to. Let's see. I will pause there. All I had was really a screenshot of what that billing user section of the Google Cloud billing account looked like. I didn't want to log into my actual account for the demo, but I did have a screenshot there. But you can actually also see that on our support hub in our billing articles section. So that is mainly what I have today. We did have a few questions